you won't want to miss it. And I didn't even tell them that I was gonna plug that. So get signed up, or I don't know if we're doing sign-ups, but just be there. Today, the question that I want to pose to all of you as we get started is, by a show of hands, how many people in this room would say they want to be successful? By show of hands. We're not getting into Ryan, what does success mean in your eyes? We're not getting just success in general. What I want to do is I want to, hey, Zach, I think there's music playing. I mean, I like it. It's cool, but that's fun. So just about everyone raised their hand when they said they want to be successful. And what I want us to recognize is this innate desire for human beings to try to strive for success, to try to win, to try not to fail. But I would argue that sometimes failure is actually exactly what we need to propel us into the success that we want to have. And if you've been here the past few weeks, we've been diving into the book of Joshua in a series called Joshua Living on the Edge of Victory. Victory, success, winning, not failing, living on the edge of victory. And I would argue that victory, so often in this world, in our life, is actually a result of how we respond to failure. And I promise you, Notre Dame fans, this message was written before last night. I was rooting for Notre Dame last night. My wife's a Notre Dame fan, but I promise you this was written before then. Sometimes I think success, winning, victory can be a result of how we respond to our mistakes, our failures, our shortcomings. In fact, I think sometimes failure is actually exactly what we need to propel us into success. Mistakes are exactly what we need to launch us into the life that God has for us. And so today we're going to be diving back into the book of Joshua and looking at how Joshua and the Israelite people responded to failure. If you weren't here this past week, last Sunday, Pastor Matt talked about Joshua chapter 7, and we learned about the Israelite people's failures. And if you haven't had the chance to watch it, I encourage you to go back to our YouTube page, go to our website, check out that message, because this is the sequel of that message. It's the next chapter in Joshua, but it's just how do we respond to failure? And so to do that, we're going to dive into the book of Joshua chapter 8. But before we do that, I just want to pray, and then we can dive on in. So if you would please bow your heads with me and let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for giving us this morning, this brisk morning. I thank you for whatever circumstances brought everyone in here today, whatever circumstances they might have had to overcome, whatever reason that they had for entering in these doors this morning. I pray that you show us why we came here this morning, God. We believe you are not a God of accident. We believe you are a God of purpose. And I believe each and every individual in here today is here for a reason, God. And I pray that the words that are spoken out of my mouth today are not my own, but they are yours. I pray that the message that is received by the hearts of people in this room are not a message from me, but God, of you. I pray that you help me get out of your way. I pray that you help us get out of your way so that you can do the work that you want to do, God. Open up our hearts to receive what it is you want us to receive. Open up our ears to hear what you want us to hear, and open up our eyes to see this world, see the opportunities that you want us to see, God. It's in your wonderful name we pray. Amen. Amen. So we're going to dive right in. Joshua, leading up to this point, if you haven't been able to be here the past few weeks, we've been looking at the book of Joshua, and so I'm going to give you a quick Cliff Notes version of what we've kind of talked about so far in Joshua. So we started out in Joshua, and Joshua is the very next leader for the Israelite people, God's chosen people throughout the Old Testament. Joshua is the very next leader following up Moses. And Moses was an incredible leader. Some of you might have seen the Prince of Egypt. It's the cartoon that kind of portrays the life of Moses. He was the leader that got the Israelite people out of slavery and into freedom. That's a pretty tough act to follow. And Joshua's responsibility was actually not only to follow in the footsteps of Moses and fill in his shoes, but his responsibility was to take the Israelite people to the promised land. Big shoes to fill. And we learn in Joshua chapter 1, God tells Joshua, be strong and courageous. Be strong and very courageous. And we fast forward a little bit through the life and leadership of Joshua when we see the Israelite people going and in pursuit of this promised land. They're going to try to overtake this city of Jericho that is surrounded by these giant walls. And Joshua and the Israelite people take a different approach, a different strategy to war in that time, and they decide to march around the city. And they march and they march and they march for days and days and days. And then the walls of Jericho come crumbling down. They come crumbling down, and the Israelite people overtake the city. It's a huge success. And up until that point, Joshua and his leadership and the Israelite people have really only known success. But the very next chapter, see, that was Joshua chapter 6. The very next chapter, Joshua chapter 7, we see what happens, the opposite of success. And we see the Israelite people, and this is what Pastor Matt talked about last week, they're overconfident in their own strength and their own ability. They think, oh, we overcame Jericho, now it's time to attack this small town of Ai, and we're just going to go in and we'll be fine. And what happens is 36 of their warriors are killed, and they are fleeing out of Ai back to safety. We see failure. And throughout that chapter, we actually see that the reason that they failed not only is because they're overconfident, but because they also had one of their members of the Israelite people, Achan, actually, when they took over Jericho, he actually decided to take some of their winnings for himself and hide it away instead of bringing it all to God. And because he lied, they failed. And that's kind of where we're picking up in Joshua chapter 8. Where we're picking up is actually right after this response, this failure. And so for today, we have 4 main points, and my main points are much shorter than some of our other teaching pastors' main points, and so don't be too alarmed. We're not going to be here for 2 hours, just be an hour and a half. I'm just kidding. Our 4 main points, I'm just going to give them to you right away so that you can write them in, if you have the handout, you can write them in, and then we can dive deep into what each one means. And we're going to call these the 4 P's of regaining lost ground. I originally wanted to say the 4 P's of pushing past failure and put failure with a PH, but I thought that'd be too confusing. So the 4 P's of regaining lost ground. The first P of regaining lost ground is pivot. Everyone say pivot. Good. The second P of regaining lost ground is posture. Everyone say posture. Some of you are saying the word and writing at the same time. You're more talented than I am. The third P of regaining lost ground is prepare. Everyone say prepare. And the fourth P of regaining lost ground is pursue. Everyone say pursue. Pursue. So today's message, I think I forgot to talk about the title of the message, so Tim, I apologize for that. Today's message is Joshua, regaining lost ground. Thank you, Tim. Can everyone give Tim a big round of applause back there doing the slides? He's the man. He's a Michigan fan, so he's good. The 4 P's of regaining lost ground. We're going to start with pivot. Everyone say pivot. If you see the picture on the screen, some of my friends' fans in here, as soon as I said pivot, you just heard Ross screaming, pivot! I should have pulled up the video, but I didn't because that would be too distracting. Pivot. And this actually comes from before chapter 8. It's actually the end of chapter 7, what Pastor Matt actually talked about. And I said, if you want to go back and listen, he actually hits on what pivot means toward the end of his message and how we respond to our failure, how we respond to our shortcomings. And so in Joshua chapter 7, if you have a Bible with you, you can pull it out, Joshua chapter 7. We're going to be in Joshua chapter 7 and 8, mostly 8 the whole time. If you don't have a Bible with you and you want a physical Bible, there's Bibles in some of the seats in front of you, or you can go to sermons.church and look up Cornerstone Church as well. But Joshua chapter 7 is where we're going to pick up actually toward the end of that. Joshua chapter 7, verse 24. We're seeing how Joshua and the Israelite people respond to Achan's lying, to their failure, to their shortcomings. And in verse 24, this is what it says. It says, "Then Joshua, together with all of Israel, took Achan, son of Zerah, the silver, the robe, the gold bars, his sons and daughters, his cattle, his donkeys and sheep, his tent, and all that he had to the valley of Acre. Joshua said, 'Why have you brought this trouble on us? The Lord will bring trouble on you today.'" What happened was the Israelite people, what Joshua had seen is he had seen that they were heading down a path that they weren't supposed to be heading. They were doing things they weren't supposed to be doing, and they had to recognize that they had to stop that and turn back to the road that they were supposed to be going on. And so what they did, they saw Achan heading into this line, this deceitfulness, and even buried underneath that, this overconfidence that the Israelite people had. And they had to stop. They had to plant their foot and stop heading in the direction that they were heading. And they had to pivot. See, pivoting away from the life that we are living into the life that God has for us requires two things. It requires self-awareness to see what we are doing is not necessarily right. And it requires strength or stubbornness to be able to turn away. Maybe for you, this looks like, let's see. Maybe for you, credit card debt is tough. And you're self-aware enough to know that putting more things on the credit card, buying that TV, going on that vacation, it's not good. It's going to add up. So you recognize that, and you just need to have the stubbornness, the strength to turn away from that. Or you know that you want to start going to the gym and working out and that type of thing, and that's important to you, but sleeping feels so good. And the gym has people there. So I don't need to, sometimes we just need to have the strength and the stubbornness to turn away from that thought, that train of thought, that thinking. Or maybe for us, it's that one coworker or classmate that just gets on our nerves, and we are just so short with them. We are actually kind of mean to them, and we start actually talking bad about them behind their backs. And deep down, even if it feels good sometimes, we know it's not good. We need to have the stubbornness, the strength to actually be kind, be nice, and not gossip or slander. For me, this is truth and vulnerable moment here. For me, it looks like eating healthy. My wife and I have been trying to eat healthy. We've been together for about 10 years now. And eating healthy is something that we strive to do. But for me, Martin's donuts are just so good. Right? Amen. Thank you. And it's not just one donut either. You see, for me personally, I need 2 custard-filled donuts with a nice big tall glass of milk and then a nice powdered donut to finish it off. And Saturday mornings are just so great when we started off that way. But I know that's not good. I know health and eating good things is, although not necessarily always fun, it's good. And so I vow today, I'm self-aware, I see that that's not good, to try to have the strength and the stubbornness to go to Martin's and not stop by the deli, the bakery. Just get the things on the grocery list. So I don't know what that looks like for you, but I think if we're all being honest, there are things in our lives that we know are not necessarily the plans, the things that God might have for us. And we need to be self-aware enough to know that that's not good. Scrolling through social media late at night, that's not good. Going to that certain website, that's not good. Comparing our lives, our things, that's not good. And have the strength and the stubbornness to turn away. Maybe deleting social media for a week so we stop comparing ourselves to others. Maybe putting site blockers on our phone like Pastor Matt talked about last week. Whatever that is, to pivot away. Everyone say pivot. Pivot. That's the first P of regaining lost ground is pivot. The second P of regaining lost ground is posture. Everyone say posture. Posture. And this actually comes from the very beginning of Joshua chapter 8. Joshua 8:1. This is what it says. This is God talking to Joshua. Then the Lord said to Joshua, "Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. Take the whole army with you and go up and attack Ai. For I have delivered into your hands the king of Ai, his people, his city, and his land." Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. Well, we have to recognize, because that's a really good verse to post on Instagram. It's a really good verse to write on our dash. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. But we need to recognize what the Israelite people were actually going through. You see, they had just come from failure. They had just failed at doing what God was saying that they were going to do. And I don't know about you, but so often for me, fear and discouragement come with failure. And it's this posture that God, because God knows that. He knows that after we pivot away from the wrong things that we were doing, from the failure, from the mistakes, and we try to turn back to regain this lost ground, he knows that it's so easy for us to take on a posture of failure, to say, yeah, I'm going to stop eating Martin's Donuts, but then the next time I go to Martin's, I walk through and I'm like, but I have to. I turn away, but I'm like, how long am I going to be facing that way? I'm going to be right back down this road that I know I shouldn't be on. We wear this posture of failure, of our past mistakes. It's like waking up in the morning, filling up your cup of coffee, spilling it on your shirt, and still not changing your shirt, just getting in the car and going to work anyway. We're wearing our past mistakes. We're wearing our failures on our shirts. And what God's saying, he knows this tendency that we have to be fearful and discouraged after failure. And he wants to nip that in the bud right away and say, do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. Be strong and courageous. Be strong and courageous. What he was saying in Joshua chapter 1, be strong and very courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. We take on a posture of confidence. But we need to recognize where that confidence comes from, actually. See, because at the end of verse 1, it says, for I, this is God talking to Joshua, for I have delivered into your hands the king of Ai, his people, his city, and his land. Because you see, when we take a posture of confidence in ourselves, how many of you know that that's only going to last for so long? But God says, for I have delivered Ai into your hands. Where we find our confidence, where we find our courage, where we find our strength needs to come from something beyond ourselves. It needs to come from something eternal. The confidence that comes with God, our confidence in God comes with the courage and strength that we need to have a posture that's going to help us regain lost ground. The second P of regaining lost ground is posture. Everyone say posture. You guys are so good. Good job. The third P of regaining lost ground is prepare. Everyone say prepare. This comes actually from a couple verses later, starting in verse 3, Joshua 8, verse 3. It says, so Joshua and the whole army moved out to attack Ai. He chose 30,000 of his best fighting men, sent them out at night with these orders. Listen carefully. You are to set an ambush behind the city. Don't go far from it. All of you will be on alert. I and all those with me will advance on the city. And when men come out against us, as they did before, we will flee. They will pursue us until we have lured them away from the city, for they will say they are running away from us as they did before. So when we flee from them, you are to rise up from your ambush and take the city. The Lord your God will give it into your hand. When you have taken the city, set it on fire, do what the Lord has commanded. See to it you have my orders. Prepare. This is so easy to skip over, the preparation. But notice what Joshua didn't do. Joshua didn't hear God say, I will deliver into your hands this city of Ai. I will give you this city. Joshua didn't hear that and say, okay, I'm going. Let's go, people. Let's just go. God's going to give it to us. Let's go. No, he had to prepare. In fact, as we continue to read, it says they actually waited till the next morning after even their strategy meeting. They had preparation. They had a strategy. They had timing. They knew God was going to provide it, but they wanted to prepare. And I think sometimes we kind of skip over that part. We think, heading down this path, want to eat healthy, no more Martin's Donuts, turn away, take on a posture, I'm going to do it. But we don't have a meal plan. We don't go to the grocery store and get actual healthy food. We say we want to go to the gym, we want to work out, we want to be healthy. We turn away, we have a posture, we're going to do it. But we don't even have a gym membership. Or if we do, we don't have a plan when we get there. Or we want to get out of credit card debt, we want to start budgeting, so we turn away, take on a posture, we're going to do it. But we don't even write out an actual physical budget for our lives, like our monthly budget, that type of thing. It's preparation. It reminds me of a time when I was in college. I think it was probably my senior year at college. And one of the requirements of graduating from the school that I was at was taking 6 credit hours of a foreign language class. And For whatever reason, I decided to ignore that the first 3 years and 1 semester of college. But it came down to it, and I had to take 6 credit hours of a foreign language in order to graduate on time. And so 6 credit hours at the college that I was at is typically 2 semesters worth of classes. So this would be 2 semesters worth of a foreign language, but the problem was I wanted to graduate, it was the spring of my senior year, so I wanted to graduate that semester. So there was one other option that I had. It was to take an accelerated French class that had every day, it was 6 credit hours. You had class every day, and you had to kind of have a background of at least knowing French a little bit. I mean, it's a college-level French class, accelerated. So most of the people, my professor, he lived in the French-speaking part of Canada for most of his life, so he knew French. Most of the people in my class had taken French throughout high school. And so I decided, you know what? It can't be that hard. I'll sign up for it. Mind you, I had taken 3 years of Spanish in high school, but so I had never spoken French before in my life. And the first week of class, I don't know why I feel nervous saying this. My mom's in the room. I don't think I've ever told her that I struggled in school before. So you're getting the real me. First week of class, we had a test to kind of see where we are at, like at speaking French, learning French, reading French. It's kind of, it was a grade. You would get graded for it, and it would impact your grade for the semester. And I had to pass this. By the way, I had to pass this class in order to graduate as well. So it wasn't just, I couldn't just take the 6 credit hours, not do it. So I had to pass. So we take the test first week of school. The second week of school, we get back. It's a Monday morning, French class. We're sitting in there. And he's always, when we walk into the room, he's always playing French music and stuff like that. And so we get there, we go through class. At the end of class, he hands out the tests, hands back the tests that are graded. But he doesn't give me my test. So my optimistic self was like, well, I must have done so good that he doesn't even need to. I'm kidding. I knew something was up. And so when class was over and people started leaving, he said, Ryan, can you come see me at my desk? And he had my test, and he handed it to me. And I'm telling you, I've never seen red Sharpie so red in my life with a big, fat F on there. It was not good. And he said, Ryan, you failed bad on this test. Have you taken French before? I was like, no, I took Spanish. He's like, so why are you in this class? Well, I need to graduate in the spring. He said, Ryan, I don't know if there's any way that you can catch up and make up this. This test alone is worth a percentage of your grade, but also this is the basics of French that we're going to kind of go from here. I'll tell you what. This is what he said. Tomorrow morning, Tuesday morning, literally like a couple days after I failed this test miserably, tomorrow morning you come to my office at 7 a.m. and you can retake this test, and we can kind of go from there. And my initial thought was, man, last week I just failed this miserably. What do you think is going to change from now to then? What? I was so discouraged. I knew that I had not prepared well for the test. I was not ready. I had not taken years of French in high school or anything like that. And so my posture, we talked about posture in the last point, my posture was I am going to fail this again. But I also wanted to graduate. I also was going to get married right after graduation, so that was kind of important for me to get college over with. So I knew that, one, I had to pivot away from what I've been doing. I had to actually study and try to learn. I had to take on a posture of I can do this. Because if I took on a posture while taking this test of I'm just going to fail again, that's not going to be very helpful. Wearing that failure on my shirt is not going to help me out when I take the test again. And then I had to prepare like crazy. So that night, I was a basketball player in college, so we had practice and stuff like that. When I got back to my dorm that night, I studied like crazy for French. I was watching French TV. I was listening to French podcasts. I was reading my textbook over and over again. I prepared like crazy. And when I went to the test that morning, I took on a posture of I can do this. I took the test, and I probably still got like a C or something like that, but at least I passed. At least I had a baseline of something I could build on. And the good thing is actually because I prepared so hard for that test, it actually did regain some of that lost ground that I had lost from the baseline of that class, and I was able to pass that class and graduate. It was about preparation, though. And I think sometimes I think God is calling some of us to something, but he wants to prepare us for it first before he releases us to it. And the issue is when we see God might be calling us to something, some of us get so excited and we start running after it so fast. We don't let him prepare it for us. And the issue without preparing, if we're talking about this illustration of heading in the wrong direction, planting, pivoting, posture, if we don't prepare, we don't know where we're going. If I'm trying to get over there and I don't prepare of how to get there, I might just start running this way. I might start running this way. I might get so turned around that I start heading right back in the same direction that I was going before. Without preparation, we find ourselves lacking in how to regain this lost ground. The Israelite people, man, could you imagine Joshua as a leader? Trying to fill the shoes of Moses, coming off of his first failure as a leader. And God tells him, don't be afraid, don't be discouraged, I'm going to give you this city. How hard would that be as a leader not to get so excited and just say, okay, let's go? But he said, I'm going to prepare. We're going to prepare, and we're going to do this right. The third P of regaining lost ground is prepare. The fourth P of regaining lost ground is pursue. Everyone say pursue. Pursue. And this comes actually from basically the rest of Joshua chapter 8, but I'll focus on one verse in particular. It's verse 26, and this is what it says. It says, for Joshua did not draw back the hand that held out his javelin until he had destroyed all who had lived in Ai. You see, there came a point in the Israelite people where they had pivoted away from the past mistakes that they had made. They had to take on a posture of courage and strength, confidence in God. They had to prepare. But there had to come a point where they had to pursue. They had to pursue the ground that they had lost. They had to pursue what they were going to do. If I'm heading in this direction, I plant, I pivot, I take on a posture of confidence and courageous. I prepare. Doesn't matter how hard I pivot. Doesn't matter how great my posture is. Doesn't matter how much I prepare. There's no possible way I can get to that side of the stage without actually going, without taking steps, without pursuing. And can I tell you something? I don't have notes, but this is just something that came to me. These first three parts of regaining lost ground, the pivot, the posture, the pursuit, is going to give us the confidence that we need, the strength that we need to pursue full speed ahead, to conquer the AIs in our life. There comes a point in time where we just need to go. We need to pursue. We need to take that job interview. We need to take that test. We need to go to the gym. We need to start eating healthy. We need to pay off our credit card. We need to start saving. We need to budget and follow it. We need to join a small group. We have to start going to church regularly. We have to start serving. We have to conquer the AIs in our life. We have to go. And some of us have been sitting over here for so long. We pivoted. We know what we were doing is not good. We have a posture. We're preparing. But we still feel like we have ground to make up, and we can't figure out why. But the reason is because we're not actually pursuing that ground. We have to pursue. We have to pursue. The fourth P of regaining lost ground is pursue. Everyone say pursue. Pivot, posture, prepare, pursue. You guys want a tricky one? Everyone say the 4 Ps. Pivot, posture, prepare, pursue. You guys are so good. Pivot, posture, prepare, pursue. I'm really hoping that sticks. I told my wife it as I was preparing, and she got like 2 of the 4 right after I said it to her the first time. So she's coming to 11:15 service, so I can say that right now. I'm just kidding. So one thing that I like to do as I read the Bible, because I'm not the smartest person in the world, so sometimes reading the Bible is hard, and I know some of you might be able to relate. Sometimes it's confusing, sometimes it's hard. So one thing that I like to do that helps me actually understand what the Bible is saying more is find parallels. Find things that happen in one part of the Bible and see similar interactions in another part of the Bible. And I think there's actually a parallel in the Bible that runs pretty parallel with what the Israelite people did to recover from their failure. And it's actually over 1,500 years later. This guy named Paul, who we know as Paul, and his whole life actually kind of follows these 4 Ps of regaining lost ground. And if you don't know who Paul is, that's okay. I'm going to explain a little bit of his life and tell you where he's at. But Paul kind of came onto the scene in the Bible after Jesus had already lived through his life and died and came back to life and then rose back up into heaven. That's where Paul kind of comes back into the story, and we see Paul regaining lost ground, responding to missing the mark, responding to living a life that wasn't the life that God had planned for him or intended to him. And so we're going to see these 4 P's of regaining lost ground in Paul's life, and that'll start in Acts chapter 9. Acts chapter 9. One thing you should know about Paul is originally his name was Saul, and so you're going to see Saul in this part, but it's Paul. He changes his name, that type of thing. So Acts chapter 9, this is what it says. Meanwhile, Saul, Paul, was still breathing out murderous threats against the Lord's disciples. I should probably say something first. Saul, Paul, at this point in his life, he had devoted his entire life, his occupation, to murdering, imprisoning, and persecuting followers of Jesus. He was destroying families, cities, towns, and he was doing whatever he could to stop the movement of the early church, which was known as the Way. The Way. That was him. So that's what he was. He was breathing out murderous threats against the Lord's disciples. He's heading in this direction, if you know what I'm saying. We continue on. He went to the high priest and asked him for letters to the synagogues in Damascus, so that if he found any there who belonged to the Way, the early church, whether men or women, he'd take them as prisoners to Jerusalem. As he neared Damascus on his journey, suddenly a light from heaven flashed around him. He fell to the ground and heard a voice say, "Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me?" "Who are you, Lord?" Saul asked. "I am Jesus, whom you are persecuting," he replied. Saul was heading down a direction where, he was literally on the road. When he's traveling to Damascus, he's literally on his way to take people as prisoners for following Jesus. And what happens on his way there, he meets Jesus. And from that moment on, for the rest of his life, he had to pivot away from what he was doing. He had to turn away from what he was doing. And in fact, Jesus actually takes away Saul's vision for a short period of time. Because sometimes we have to stop seeing the world the way that we have been seeing it in order to turn it and step into the world that God has for us. He's heading in this direction. He meets Jesus and he pivots. Let's continue on. It's Saul's story and Paul's story. In chapter 9, verse 19. That's where we're going to pick up. Acts 9, verse 19. Saul, this is right after he had met Jesus. He had pivoted away. A guy named Ananias, who was a follower of Jesus, actually helps him. Sometimes we need help as we're pivoting because we're not strong enough to do it on our own. So we pick up Acts 9, 19. Saul spent several days with the disciples in Damascus. At once he began to preach in the synagogues that Jesus is the Son of God. All those who heard him were astonished and asked, "Isn't this the man who those call on his name, or isn't this the man who raised havoc in Jerusalem among those who call on this name? And hasn't he come here to take them as prisoners to the chief priests?" Yet Saul grew more and more powerful and baffled the Jews living in Damascus by proving that Jesus is the Messiah. It could have been very easy for Paul to meet Jesus, recognize what he was doing was wrong, be strong enough to turn away because he has help from Ananias, be strong enough to turn away, but then think to himself, looking at this road ahead, this ground that he has to regain, there is no way that I can do that. They know what I've done. Literally, it says that in the Bible. Isn't this the man who came here to put us in jail? Is this the man who raised havoc on Jerusalem? They know what I've done. And so he could turn away from the life he was living, but take on this posture of, there's no way I can get there. I can't regain this lost ground. I can't make up for the mistakes that I've already made. But he doesn't. He finds strength and courage from confidence in God. Jesus, the very man who just changed his life, who pivoted the direction of his eternity. He turns away, and with the confidence in God, he begins preaching the good news about who Jesus is in such a way that it's surprising even the followers of Jesus. It's surprising the Jews. He's proving who Jesus is. Isn't this the guy who came here to persecute us? It's because he had a posture of who God is, a posture of confidence, a posture. We see, and we continue on in the book of Paul, the book of Acts, the life of Paul. My apologies. And as we read throughout the rest of Paul's life, yes, he might have, after just 3 days after pivoting away from the life he was living, he began preaching the good news about who Jesus is. But then after that, he actually spends 3 years studying, praying, learning, before going on some of the most important and essential mission work in the history of this world. 3 years. And I think it's important to notice the difference in what Paul was doing. See, 3 days after he had pivoted his life away, he took on this posture of God, he was telling people who Jesus was. It's never too early in your relationship with Jesus to share who Jesus is. It's never too early. But there is this time that Paul decides to take preparation because he knows what he's about to do is going to be hard. He's about to go conquer his AI. Go out on a mission field. So he spends 3 whole years preparing to do that. And then after that, man, he pursues. And if you read through the New Testament, the second half of this Bible, most of this second half of the Bible, most of the New Testament is actually from Paul. Saying things that earlier on in his life he would have had people murdered and imprisoned for saying. The pursuit that he had is making an impact still to this day. Paul's life is exactly what those 4 P's represent. He pivoted away from the life that he had. He took on a posture of confidence in God. He prepared himself for the mission at hand, and then he pursued that with all that he had. 4 P's: pivot, posture, prepare, pursue. And so we only have a few minutes left, but I thought I'd share. Actually, just a few weeks ago, I was struggling with this, regaining lost ground. I was preparing for this message even, and I had some good things from the Bible, but myself personally, I felt like a disconnect between me and God, which is normal, but it's not necessarily a good thing. And I was wondering why. And so just a couple weeks ago, the staff here at Cornerstone had mandated by our lead pastor, a mandated God Day, where we had to spend time away from work, away from the office, away from home, get away and spend time one-on-one with God. A mandated God Day. And so going into that day, I knew I could feel this disconnect with me and God, our relationship. I don't know what it was. I was trying to figure it out, and I couldn't figure it out. So I'm like, okay, this God Day, I'm hoping God just shows me what it is. And so for my God Day, I decided I was going to drive up to St. Joe, Michigan. Not because I'm a beach guy or anything, but I just love downtown St. Joe. I love the harbor, all that stuff. And I was just going to go there, spend time with God. And so on my way up to St. Joe, I began asking God, what's the deal here? What am I missing? I'm trying. What's going on? And what was revealed to me was actually shocking, but it showed me exactly what I was trying to do. You see, a few years ago, my wife and I decided to take a leap of faith. It was bigger than a step of faith. It was a leap of faith where we decided to move 14 hours away from all of our family, all of our friends, everything that we had known, to step into what we thought God was calling us to move to North Carolina. I was going to start a job at a church. She was going to be teaching. We took a leap of faith pursuing that. And when we got there, we saw God move in ways that we couldn't even explain. My wife got a job at the best school in the county. Don't even know how. There's never openings there, but somehow there was an opening and she got the job. Great kids, great parents, great families, a great school, great coworkers. And she's a great teacher. And myself, I was doing student ministry, and we saw God moving throughout the middle school and high school students in Pitt County like I had never experienced before. We saw people preaching the good news of Jesus in their cafeteria. We saw hundreds of students just coming to experience Jesus on a weekly basis. It was nothing that I could have done or gotten credit for. It was only God. But then when we were there and it was winter, my wife and I had been praying, and we felt God kind of say, it's kind of time for us to take a step in our family, grow our family, and start trying for a kid. And with that, we felt like it might be time to move back closer to family, move back to Indiana. And I remember the conversations that I had, with the executive pastor who took a big risk bringing me all the way from Indiana, a young guy who really didn't have the experience they were looking for. Talking with the lead pastor who, again, took a risk on me, took a liking on me, poured into me, and telling him what we were thinking, and they were so kind and generous. But I remember as we began packing up the U-Haul and moving back to Indiana, I couldn't help but feel, and I'm sorry, I haven't shared this before, so I'm sorry for being emotional. Couldn't help but feel, but the ground that I had gained by taking that leap of faith, that I had lost it all. And I felt like I was letting God down. And so for the next couple of years, I tried to get back into student ministry at a great church. Didn't work out. Ended up working in the corporate world, working for some incredible people, being in meetings with people that I did not deserve to be in meetings with. Didn't work out. Interviewed and got the job here. And yet it still felt like I was trying to climb. I was trying to regain this ground that I had lost. And honestly, it felt like I was trying to climb a mountain made of sand, and every step I would take, every reach I would have, I just found myself going further and further down. I felt like I was in quicksand trying to find my way out, climb my way out, but the more I tried to climb out, the further I sunk. So as I'm driving to St. Joe just a couple weeks ago, I'm asking God, where's this disconnect? Where's this coming from? I'm trying to get this back, God. And as I'm driving, I didn't even make it to St. Joe yet. I'm still dealing with the crazy Michigan drivers. My mom's from Detroit, I can say that. And as I'm driving there, I just feel God's presence, and I feel him say, Ryan, you're trying to regain ground that wasn't yours to begin with. That ground that you lost, this disconnect that you feel, this relationship that you and I have is not from anything that you've done. It's from what Jesus did. And I realized in that moment as I'm driving to St. Joe that it didn't matter how hard I pivoted, the posture that I had, the preparation that I made, the pursuits that I had. I can't regain that ground between me and my relationship with Jesus because I didn't gain it to begin with. It wasn't from what I did, it was from what he did. So as I'm sitting in my truck driving to St. Joe, Michigan, I get this clarity. There's one ground that we can't regain because we didn't gain it to begin with. That should be so freeing for us. Our relationship with the creator of the universe was not ours that we earned. It was not through anything that we did, but it was through the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. There's one ground that we can't regain, no matter how hard we pivot. No matter how hard we pivot away from what we've been doing. This is good in a relationship with Jesus. It's good to pivot. It's good to repent, to turn away from the life that we have been living and head toward the life that God has for us. That's good. It's good to take on a posture of confidence in God. When we're in a relationship with Jesus, that's good. It's good to prepare, to go to small groups, to go to church, to go to school. It's good to prepare in our relationship with Jesus. And it's good to pursue the mission that God has for us to go and make disciples, to love God and love people. That's good. But get this straight, without Jesus, it's nothing. Without Jesus, it's nothing. So now,